Hello, hello, and a beautiful day to all of you, wherever you are. Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Els. It is another wonderful Tuesday, another terrific Tuesday, another God bless Tuesday, and we are glad to be here with you again on Conversations with Dr. Els. I hope that you are having a good day so far and blessings on you as we share together our conversation. Remember, get in early, share this conversation with everyone. Let them know Conversations with Dr. Els is on, and we are looking forward for another wonderful time. Last week we started to talk about um, prenuptial agreement. Okay, and we talk about prenuptial agreement, and today we're going to talk a bit more about that. And so we want you to get the couples. This is the month of love. They say it's Black History Month, but it's also when you celebrate Valentine's Day. So we want you to get the lovers, get the husbands and the wives, get the families, and yes, get all those who need to hear about this. So we want you to just find someone and tell someone Conversations with Dr. Els is on. Remember, in this conversation, we deal with in these conversations, sorry, we deal with a lot of social family issues, church issues, whatever it is. We are not afraid to tackle on Conversations with Dr. L. So hey, just remember, share this broadcast. One, two, let folks know that Conversations with Dr. Els is on, and let them know that they can join. Let them know that they can join in this conversation. Okay, a little feedback, but let them know they can join in this conversation, and we're looking forward for all you guys, those of you who are accustomed to be on Conversations with Dr. Els, those of you who are new. We want to say, hey, welcome to Conversations with Dr. Els, and let me say hi to Reverend Colleen. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And all of you, remember again, you can share, you can share, you can share, you can share this conversation. We're looking forward for you guys. Hi, Cuz Vanetta, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And all of you, Evan, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. It's a beautiful day here in Barbados, and we're glad for the sunshine. We are glad for all that is happening. So remember, Conversations with Dr. Els is usually on Tuesdays at 12 Atlantic Standard Time, 11 right now, Eastern Standard Time. But wherever you are, whether you will be watching Conversations with Dr. Els right now or later, we want to welcome you. I want to just say hi to Rachel. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And so we're digging into this conversation, talking about should we have a prenuptial agreement, and we are saying yes, 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 and a big yes. You should have, okay, a prenuptial agreement. So if you are married and you did not have one, you probably need to go back over and begin to put together one. If you are not married yet, or you don't have a lifelong partner, before you do so, we want you to get one. But we said the prenuptial agreement that we are talking about is not one that many people think about, or when persons hear about prenuptial agreement, they think of assets, they think of just making sure that we guard our assets, and we make sure that, when we get into the marriage or the lifelong situation, we make sure that the person comes in does not necessarily come in to get what we have and stuff like that. So we seek to guard our assets, right? And that's what people think of when they think of prenuptial agreement. And we're saying that in that legal prenuptial agreement, then we have a lot of people who are mistrusting each other. All right, so we have a lot of mistrust in that aspect of those prenups, and that is why many people will go and have that. But there is the prenup that doesn't need the mistrust that we all should have, everybody should have. And so last week we started talking about it. And remember, okay, guys, share this broadcast, share it, let everybody know that we are on. Okay. Last week we said that before you get married, before you commit to a partner, a lifelong partner, there are certain agreements that you should have, that you should trash out. There are certain things that you need to agree upon, and that is before you get into marriage. Make sure that you agree on these things, all right? And so some of them we talked about. Some of those that we talked about, we said things like, you must decide what is the foundation. Okay, you must decide what's the foundation. Okay, in other words, what is the go-to when we are having challenges? What is the go-to when we face situations? All right. And for the Christian, the Bible is our marriage manual. And therefore, when we are facing situations, the place we need to go is to the Bible. All right. Let me pause and just welcome Jana. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els, one of our conversation family, Dr. Els family. Great having you locked on. So we are saying that you need to decide what is the foundation. And whether you're a Christian or not, there should be a foundation. There should be a good tool. There should be something that you can say with your partner. Hey, this is how we view life together, and this is what we will take our cue from. Okay, we said also that in that agreement, in that prenuptial agreement, there must be discussion on the whole aspect of children, whether you want children or not, and how do you raise those children. So you make some decision. You can't make all the decisions then, but at least you come to a place where you make some decisions as to how are we going to raise our children. You need to agree on how many children we would want, how many children we think we can afford, um, and such like that. And I know that sometimes you plan, but then things happen. Okay, so but there must be that agreement. Okay, even if you are coming, if you're coming from a different worldview, you need those conversations. So it's very important that if you are coming from a different worldview, or you need to have those conversations. You and your partner need to decide that this is what we're going to do, because what happens is that we find persons get into marriage, make a lifelong commitment with a partner, and then the whole reality opens, and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to deal with this. They have not discussed it before. And therefore, what happened is that they find themselves in trouble. Hello to you, Irene. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. So we are saying in this conversation, before you get into such a commitment, or at the beginning of deciding to have that commitment, you need to have an agreement. You need to have a prenuptial agreement. And it is great to write that down. Very important so that you can go back to it. Because when you get into the situation and you are having challenges, then you can go back and say, hey, this is what we decided. How can we walk through that? Okay. And so we talk about, if there is one vote, there's one-on-one vote where, you're talking about this and you believe that, and the other party believes something else. What would be the tiebreaker? Who would be the tiebreaker? Okay, in your prenuptial agreement, we also talk about you must have finances. All right, you must talk about finances. You must deal with finances. You must decide who is paying what bills. How are these bills going to be paid? How are we dealing with this? What if one person lost their job? Okay, or in another case, if the person isn't working, how do we deal with stuff like that? So we need to be able to have some discussion before we commit to a lifelong partnership, before we commit to marriage, that you have that agreement. Okay, and we need to make sure that we have those things in place. So let me just say hi to Susan. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. It's really great having you guys week after week, blessing this program, sharing your insights and such like that. Okay, and so for example, the another thing that needs to be had in the prenuptial agreement is where you live. And you may say, well, we live in the same country, so it's easy to decide that. But what if somebody is coming from one town or village and the other person is coming from another town or village? What even if you are living in the same village? You can decide, hey, when we get married, we are going to move out and we want to live somewhere else because it will be more economical, But you might have one person saying, no, I am not moving out of my village or my town because I grew up here all my life and this is where I would stay. Now, you can't wait until you get married and one person decide to pick up that, hey, they are going to live in another village or town, and you say, I am not going. And therefore, you are married or you are living together. Well, can't be living together if you live both places, but you are together in a partnership, and then somebody is living one place and the other person is living one place. Then that is not a real partnership. So in your prenuptial agreement, these are things that you must decide to agree on. What if we have to move? Where would we move to? Are we willing to move? Okay. How about as we continue this? How about expectations? This is a big one that we need to make sure that we have in our prenuptial agreement. Okay? Expectations. What is my expectation of the relationship? What is your expectation of the relationship? So the man expects that the woman would cook and clean and wash and do all these things, and the woman expects that the man would help her doing these things. So the guy comes home and he sit down in the couch and he put up his feet and he watched television and stuff like that, and he said, well, this is what a man is supposed to do. And the wife is there or the lady is there and she's working. Or the lady is there and she is taking care of the children and he does nothing else. Now, what are the expectations in marriage? What are the expectations in the lifelong relationship, in the partnership? How do we deal with that? And maybe you can share as usual, as you do, share on this live. What are some of the expectations that people should have in marriage? Or what are some of the expectations you would have had if you were married or if you're in a lifelong relationship? What are the expectations you had? Or even if you are not in a relationship, what are some of the things that you are expecting your partner to be, or whenever you get there, your partner to have? So do I expect that the man be the head of the house? And what does that look like? What about if you're a Christian and you deal with prayer and study of the word and family devotions and such like that? What is your expectation there? Because I'll tell you, if you go into it without any expectation, you're going to fall for anything. And I've also you need you to understand that there's what is called the ideal marriage, and there is what is called the real marriage. And what does that mean? We go into a relationship with all these great ideas, and remember we talked about sometime last year. We talked about six in the marriage bed. So we go into marriage, and when we go into this lifelong relationship, and we think of all the things that we would like to see, but the reality hits, and then we don't see them happening. All right. But I ask, what are some of the expectations? What are some of the things that you think person should expect in a lifelong relationship? And while you are sharing that with us, with everybody, let me just say hi to Altris. Great having you locked on to conversations with Dr. Els. All right. So the point here is that we need to have a prenuptial agreement before we get into any lifelong relationship. Um, so, what about routines? What kind of routine would you have? All right. And especially if you understand the personality types, then you may have some challenges in the relationship if you don't put together or plan what kind of routine you would have. Because here's what you can have. You can have an introvert and an extrovert. You could have someone who is up at night and someone who goes to sleep early. Okay, you can have someone who's for example, whose energy point is highest in the night, and the other partner energy point is lowest at the night. So what happened when one person is ready, when one person is ready to do all the work, to be up, to be talking, to be sharing, the other party is ready to go to sleep. All right. Let's say hi to Hussein. Great having you locked on to conversations with Dr. Els. And a belated happy independence to Grenada. They celebrated their independence yesterday. So happy independence to you guys. So what do we have? Okay, when you have a different routine, when your energy level is higher or highest at a different point, so I'll use me as an example. I am the person who at 4 or 4:30 in the morning, I am up and I'm out and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to take on the world. So I have devotions. I'm ready to open my computer and start working on stuff. My wife, on the other hand, at that time, she's snoring away. Did I say she snores? I didn't. Oh boy. Hope she doesn't beat me for this. But she's snoring away. She's there and she's not ready to get up. But at nights, at 10 o'clock, I am ready to hit my bed. Now, I do end up being out later than that from time to time, but generally at 10, I am ready to hit my bed, and she's up and she's not ready to sleep, and she isn't ready to sleep. And so what happens, I have a friend who is usually around our conversation, who posted the other day that at early in the morning when he wants to sleep, his wife came in with a question, and hey, this is time to sleep. So how do we work through these things? Do we understand the other person's personality? Do we understand their energy point, or their highest energy point, and how do we work through that? So in a prenuptial agreement, you will be able to talk about how can we deal with that. So do I stay up late and help my partner paint the room, or do the work, or do the chores, or what, or do I go to sleep and say it really doesn't matter, I am sleepy, I need to get to sleep? Or would my partner allow me to say to get your rest because you are up early and I have a longer time to sleep? That is why we need to understand. And yes, as somebody said, understanding and compromise. Because even if you are an early sleeper, you may not go to sleep early every time. You might want to compromise and say, hey, let me stay up with my partner and for a while, and talk or so on. Even I know of spouses, even if they're talking and they're sleepy, I know, the guy or the woman, the guy a lot of times is up ready to sleep, and the wife is there and talking, and she would ask him, are you sleepy? And he would say no, because he wants to step with her. All right. And so there's where we need compromise. But we also have the challenge where people now have that issue. So, and especially, I won't say especially, but in a scenario where sex is involved, the guy is ready early in the morning, to have intimacy, but the wife is sleeping, or the female is sleeping. Or if he is a person who is up late at night, is ready to do this thing at night, to enjoy intimacy, but the other partner is sleeping, and vice versa. Or the woman is ready and the guy is sleeping, and in the morning she's ready and the guy is sleeping. And it continues like that, where you begin to have problems or have challenges in the relationship. So we're saying, from this standpoint, we need to have prenuptial agreement. We need to be able to agree on some of the things that we will do, some of the things that we must have in our relationship. I want to pause and say hi to Vonnie, great having you locked on. Hello to Pastor Williams. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. So we are talking about, yes, you should have a prenuptial agreement. But the prenuptial agreement that we are talking about is not the legal prenuptial agreement. And I'm saying that if you decide to do that for whatever reason, then it's up to you. But what we are advocating here on Conversations with Dr. Els is that there are things that you need to be able to put in place. There are things that you need to talk about. There are things that you need to communicate with your partner before you make that lifelong commitment, whether it is marriage or living together or whatever. You need to make such a decision as to how you are going to deal with different aspects in your relationship. And so expectation, we're saying that that is important, because you need to also understand people's personality. And let me warn you, never say that the other person is wrong because they are different than you. Okay, so never say that they're wrong. They might be able to do things differently or like to do things differently. Never say that they are wrong because of that. Okay, it's just being different isn't wrong. Okay, and as a matter of fact, God has created us differently, and so it's important that we show our uniqueness. And even in relationship, the way I will do something may not necessarily be the way that my partner would do it. And it doesn't mean that because I did it or usually do it this way or will do it this way, and my partner will do it another way, means that I am right for doing it this way and my partner is wrong for doing it that way. Or my partner is right for doing that way and I am wrong for doing it this way. So it is very important that we understand this. Never say the other person is wrong because they are different from you. And therefore, it's very important for you to have those prenuptial agreement. It's important for you to be able to talk about these things before you get into that lifelong relationship. Another thing that I would say that you need to be able to talk about and trash out would be the aspect of sex. You know, when it comes to that, this is also often a sore point in relationship. So persons go into the lifelong relationship and they haven't talked about sex. They just assume that sex will be great, nice, and wonderful, and all the time or whatever. And one party is thinking that, and the other party is thinking differently because they don't like, or they've had an issue. Let me pause here and say hi to Jackie and hi to you guys here on Conversations with Dr. L. It's great having you guys locked on. Okay, so what you may have someone who have a higher sex drive than the other person, and so you get into the relationship and you're thinking that, hey, every night, every day, two, three, four, 5 times a day, and then the other person is saying, hey, once per month is just good for me. Okay, and then if you don't talk about that, if you don't agree on how we're going to deal with that, then you get there and somebody become frustrated, and then you have issues in the relationship. So hey, prenuptial agreement is very important as you plan to get into a lifelong relationship. So you have that person, you work through, you say, okay, what do we do if I want to have sex and you don't at this point? How do we deal with that? And remember, I'm saying not everything you are going to be able to deal with, right there and then before, because you get into the relationship, things change, situation changes, and therefore you may not be able to walk through everything. But at least you have some foundational issues that you can deal with. You have some foundational things that you have agreed upon, that we will walk through this. And when you have challenges going through the relationship, remember, as we say, we decide what is the foundation, and you go back to the foundation, you go back to the agreement, and you decide, hey, how can we tweak this? How can we change this? How can we work on this? So it's very important for us to do that. And let me add this. The recipe for disaster in a marriage or in a relationship is thinking you can change the person, thinking that you can change your partner. Hey, that is a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for broken relationship. That's a recipe for hurt and turmoil. You do not go into a relationship thinking that you can change your spouse or change the person you are with. No. We need to get into the relationship with an attitude of serving. So, with an attitude of serving the person, and you find when you get into the relationship with an attitude of service, then the person changes to do because they love you, and they will compromise and they will work with things for the betterment of the relationship. But if you go into the relationship and you decide, you know what, I am getting into this relationship and he has to change that way. The man would have been leaving his shoes by the door from ever since because he lived by himself for years. And you come in the first day and you decide, hey, you need to move that shoe from the door. You can't just drop your shoe there and leave it. You know, vice versa, the woman may have been, because she's been driving her own car forever long time, and all the shoes are in the car, the red, the white, the black, the pink, the orange, the whatever color. You would see them all in the car, and you can come into the relationship and you say, hey, I want all those shoes out of the car. You can't leave shoes in the car because I have to clean the car and such and this and the other. All right. And you go in there and you think, well, hey, I can change that person. I can change that person. Do not go into a relationship thinking that you can change the person. It's a recipe for disaster. Hi, Stacy. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. So, what we need to do is to get into the relationship to serve. Someone is saying the car trunk is a shoe storage unit. And maybe what the person can do is buy something, they have those car trunks organizer, something like that. Buy an organizer for the woman so that you can help her to organize the shoe in the car trunk. For some people, it's in the back seat of the car on the floor. So that you can help them to organize things rather than coming in thinking that, hey, I am going to change this. Remember, I'm saying a recipe for disaster in marriage, in a lifelong relationship, is to think that you can change your partner. Okay? What you need to do is to understand that the person you are with um, is different. Okay? It's different than you. And you have to be able to walk through that. And if you do that from very early, before you decide that you are going to have that lifelong relationship with your partner, you're going to be able to avoid a lot of things that many people have problems with. Okay. You also need to understand and agree. That's right. I'm not Jesus, can't change anybody. If we think of working more on ourselves and try to change us to be more like Jesus or to be a better me, then it would be important that they become a better they so that they can help you. All right. So you also have to understand and agree on the fact that the person you are with can't meet all your needs. Okay. The person you're with can't meet all your needs, and therefore you need to give that person some space, and you need to have some space. There are some people in a relationship who are very clingy. And I know oftentimes ladies don't like to hear that, and men like to say that. And I am not talking about where persons have ulterior motives. I'm talking genuinely, where people need to understand that their partner, they can't meet all of their partner's need, and their partner can't meet all of their needs. And therefore, both persons will need to have space. I go back to what is said in Genesis. What Genesis says, the two shall be one, and therefore you need two whole persons to become one. And what do I understand by that? What I'm talking about when I say that is that you may have your partner will have friends, may want to hang out with your friends. The lady may want to have a girls' night out, the guy may want to hang with the fellas. Okay, you need to be able to give each other space, because what the guy can get when he hang with the fellas, um the woman would not be able to give him that. So you need to understand that you give people space. Let me just pause and say hi to Bishop Mark. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. We are talking about having a prenuptial agreement and the importance of having a prenuptial agreement. So we are saying that you cannot meet all of your partner's need, and your partner cannot meet all of your needs, and therefore you have to be able to give them space. You have to be able to let them hang out with their friends, let them hang out with get out there with the boys and play some cricket or some football. Get out there with the girls and have girls' night out and such like that, because intimacy doesn't only come from you being in that relationship. Some time ago we talked about the different types of intimacy, and we talk about like spiritual intimacy, we talk about intellectual intimacy, we talked about interpersonal intimacy. And therefore what we're saying is that there are certain needs that each individual would have, that you as the partner, you as the spouse will not be able to meet, and you need to understand that. So you need to give your partner space for others. Again, before you get married, there may be friends that the partner have or you have, and you just want to spend time. You got to understand that. Okay, we also have to understand in a prenuptial agreement, we also need to agree that and be willing to monitor and adjust. What do we mean by that? To monitor and adjust. In other words, if something is happening, if you're doing something, or even if I go back to the friends thing, if you're hanging out with your friends and it is affecting the relationship, then you have to monitor that, and then you have to adjust. You may have to say, well, hey, we used to hang out every week on a Friday evening, but we have to do it twice per month. Okay, I can't hang out every week again. And somebody might say, well, hey, you're no longer a man, or whatever. But it's very important, because your relationship with your partner is the apart from God, is the most important relationship that you should have. And therefore you need to adjust, you need to monitor anything that is affecting the relationship and adjust. So therefore, in your prenuptial agreement, you need to be able to discuss this. What if I'm getting out there and we're doing something that I'm accustomed to do, and it is affecting the relationship? How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to discuss this? How are we going to work this out? Okay, so that is a very important thing that you need to do. Okay, and we're saying, before you get into a lifelong relationship, before you get into marriage, these are some of the things that you need to agree on. These are things that must be in your prenuptial agreement, so that when you get into the relationship, when you get into that lifelong relationship, it will avoid a lot of the problems that many people have. Okay, so you got to be willing to monitor, you got to be willing to adjust. All right. So let me just say hi to Sheridel. Great having you locked on to conversations with Dr. Els. Another thing that I want to just share here is, what do you do when hard time comes? All right, what do you do? And let me say this: in any relationship, there will be hard time. Okay, there will come a time when you're struggling with some issue, or some decisions, that some decision to be made. Something is going to come to push at your relationship, and so you need to agree on what should we do when hard time comes. Should we go to counseling? Should we try to work it out ourselves? And you often hear some people who believe that going to counseling means that you are weak. That is not so. Okay, it's always better to try to get help as quickly as possible than to wait until this thing gets out of hand. Remember, we talked about the drip-free marriage and the leaking pipes and such like that before. All right. If you want, you can go back and you can find that. But the thing is that you need to be able to decide how you are going to deal with hard times. What if somebody if a partner his or her job, and the bills are mounting up? How do we do that? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the children and their schooling issues? What if we're taking our children to private school, and then finances, with COVID, okay, COVID and finances now has depleted. What are we going to do? Okay, so we need to be able to agree on how we are going to deal with hard times. All right, and work to that, because let me say this. If marriage, I'm bringing this to a close. We've gone over our time. Well, we still have some time. We're flexible, but um let me just say this: if marriage is about division, then you're not really married. Now, I'm talking specifically to those who are married. If marriage is about division, then you're not really married. If it is about what is mine and what is yours, or what is his and what is hers, and such like that, then you are basically, and you've heard me say this before, you're basically roommates. All right. So this is another aspect where it's a roommate situation. If you are in a relationship and it is, this is mine and this is yours, and really and truly, you have to work through that. Okay, let me give you an example. My wife has been driving a car. She owns a car before we got married. I owned my own vehicle before we got married. And there's a tendency to say, your car, or my vehicle. All right. So which vehicle we're taking? We'll take your vehicle, or we'll take my vehicle. And so had to walk out and walk through that, because when you have division, when it is about your this and my this and your that and my that, then it's really not a marriage. And this is where we get back to where we started in terms of the prenuptial agreement. And before I get there, let me just say hi to my brother Evan out there in New Jersey. Great having you locked on. This is where we go back. This is where we go back to the prenuptial agreement, because what happens then in many cases, especially with the legal prenuptial agreement where assets are involved, both parties are saying, this is mine, this is yours. And a marriage should be, this is ours. Whatever we have is ours. Whatever we come into the relationship with is ours. That is where I see it from scriptural standpoint. The two shall be one. There must be a leaving. There must be a cleaving. There must be a weaving. So in marriage, if we have a division, then you're really not married. You need to go back to your priest, your pastor, your justice of the peace, your magistrate, whoever performed the ceremony and say, hey, we need to get married again or get to a counselor or something, right? But you can't, it can't be his time and her time and his friends and her friends and it is exclusive so that my friends can't be my spouse's friend or vice versa. And my things can't be my spouse things and such like that. And we have to be careful because it is easy to get to the place where we deal with mine and yours and such like that. But we're saying that before we get into a lifelong relationship, you must have a prenuptial agreement. There must be things that you agree on. If you haven't done that, I would admonish you, don't get into a lifelong relationship. Don't get married until you've done that. Before you go to the altar and say, I do, for better or worse, in sickness, in health, and all of that, make sure that there are some basic things that you can agree on. Okay? Make sure there's some basic things that you can agree on so that you don't get to a place where you get into the marriage and then you start finding out, hey, we are having some issues here that we did not think about that we need to deal with. All right. Hi, Amalia. Great having you locked on to conversations with Dr. Els. So, guys, should we have a prenuptial agreement? Dr. Ellis is saying yes. Should you have a legal prenuptial agreement where you decide that your assets are yours and the assets that I bring, they are mine? Dr. Ellis is saying no, he doesn't believe in that. Now, if you want to do it, then it's up to you. But should you have some agreement, written agreement on how you deal with certain issues in a lifelong relationship, how you raise the children, the school they go to, how you deal with your finances, how you deal with friends, what is your foundation, how where do you live, what are your routine, and how you deal with these things. Dr. Elsa said, yes, you should have some agreement. And oftentimes we must say, well, we have it in our heads or in our minds, but it's always good to be able to write things out. You may not be able to write everything out, but it's important that at least you write some things out. You have some things on paper or on your phone or whatever way you do it, so that you can come into a total agreement going into your lifelong relationship. So, guys, um, I would encourage that you do that. Have a prenuptial agreement. And as we are in the month of love, as you're celebrating, Valentine is coming up before we get back together. So let me wish those of you who celebrate a happy Valentine Day when it comes, and make sure that you give your spouse, your friend, something that is of worth. Okay, it may not be tangible. It doesn't have to be tangible, but make sure you have something at work. One person say, we often give things like chocolate and all these things that is unhealthy. Maybe you can give something healthy, nice onion and garlic and veggies and all that kind of stuff, that would help your spouse to live a little longer. But until then, this has been Conversations with Dr. Els. And remember, we are saying in this conversation that it is good for you to have a prenuptial agreement. It is good for you to agree on certain things before you get into a lifelong relationship. And on conversations with Dr. Els, we are aware not everyone in the conversation is married or even a Christian, because we don't really just cater for one set of people. We cater for anyone who needs relationship advice, who can we can talk with, who have wisdom. And so, whatever the situation you are in, you are welcome to conversations with Dr. Els. Just you know that we share from a faith-based spiritual standpoint, but practical issues that we seek to deal with. So spiritual but practical. Hi, Natasha. Great having you locked on to conversations with Dr. Els. Okay, so hey, get out there. Make sure you get that prenuptial agreement going, and we will see God's willing next week, Tuesday at 12 Atlantic Standard Time, 11 Eastern Standard Time. Wherever you are, South Africa, um, Zambia, in England, wherever you are, it's great to have you locked on to conversations with Dr. Els. Yes, Love Line, you are pretty late, but we understand times you will not always be on time, but we're glad that you at least just check in with us on conversations with Dr. L. So, guys, this has been a wonderful time to be with you, and I'm looking forward for sharing with you again next week, Tuesday. Remember, you can still share this broadcast. Hi, Maggie. You can still share this broadcast, share this conversation, keep sharing this conversation, and let folks know that Conversations with Dr. Els is on every Tuesday at 12 noon. Whatever you do today and for the rest of the week, remember, add value to someone's life. Amen. Add value to somebody's life. Be a good person. And remember, our webinar is coming up. It's coming up in the month of March, and we're looking forward for you guys to be on. So God bless you and have a wonderful rest of the day. Until next week, God's willing.